Hey everyone, John here! And I've been doing this for a while now, just talking to you guys about the stuff and the games that I love. And quite often, I get a comment saying, "Is that flippin' Panzer Dragoon Saga behind you?" And yeah, it flippin' is! This has been a key treasure of my collection for years and years now. My wife got this for me back when we were teenagers, just by watching random retro gaming channels, which she has no interest in. But one Christmas just surprised me with Panzer Dragoon Saga, and it's gone down as one of my favorite games of all time. And I've never really had the chance to just talk about it properly. So now we're giving it its own video. It's finally time to talk about Panzer Dragoon Saga. Let's work our way through the history of RPGs. We have Expedition 33, Persona 5, and Final Fantasy 7. I don't think any others happened. But Final Fantasy 7 really was a juggernaut of design. In the modern era, it's incredibly difficult to make a game with modern visuals that has all the content and variety of a Super Nintendo RPG. But FF7 had all that made FF6 so great with an even broader scope. More music, more set pieces, more towns, and then you get all the benefits of the next generation and CD storage with cutscenes, pre-rendered backgrounds, and snowboarding. It was pure, uncompromised perfection, and everyone wanted a piece of the pie. Panzer Dragoon Saga is often called Saga's answer to Final Fantasy VII, but in truth, it was all just timing. The two started development around the same time in 1995. It just so happened that Saga took 3 years, while FF7 took 2. And yeah, 3 years in the mid-90s was a crazy long cycle. I mean, these 3 games all released in the span of 3 years. Saga is a crown jewel of any game collection, and the highest gem of the Sega Saturn. I was lucky enough to get it before it got crazy expensive, but let's disregard its rarity and value and look at it purely for what it is. One of the greatest games most people will never play. But what's a Panzer Dragoon, you might say? Panzer Dragoon is one of the coolest rail shooters ever conceived. Think of Star Fox 64, but 2 years before Star Fox 64, and instead of shooting at what's directly in front of you, you can flip between 4 different angles and shoot all around you. Trade the whimsical yapping for beautiful CD orchestration and immaculate world building, and you've got 2 of gaming's absolute finest, especially Zwei, which is just marvelous. It is good to have some history with the series, mostly because they're just rad as flip, but Saga is pretty much standalone with only a few whispers of connected world building throughout. You can jump straight to Saga if you want. Final Fantasy VII brags to have 3 discs, and let's all point and laugh a moment. Try 4 discs, you absolute kumquat! Despite this, Panzer Dragoon Saga only clocks in at around 10 hours, but each disc is absolutely packed. There's so many pre-rendered cutscenes. The back of the FF7 box says it has over 2 hours? Which it doesn't. Did they count the pre-rendered backgrounds looping as cutscenes? Now, I counted the cutscenes in this game, and Saga has an hour and a half of cutscenes. This is a feature-length movie tucked in with the game. We're not lying like Squaresoft. There's a lot of real recorded dialogue too. The previous games had a made-up language, but Saga only does that for the intro and outro. Everything else is spoken in real Japanese dialogue, and it's all acted incredibly well. It's incredibly surreal to see a 90s RPG with actual voice acting. And it's easy to see how quickly each disc fills up with the amount of media and new locations constantly being thrown at you. Saga's a game that's always moving onward without a moment of padding or unnecessary areas. There's really only a few dungeons that eat up a substantial amount of playtime, otherwise it's shoveling you to the next location at a really rapid rate. You play as Edge, who's named that because he's edgy and falls in love with a mysterious goth girl excavated from an ancient site. Edge just sees her and decides that's his life now. To make sure no one else finds out about her, the leader Kramen kills everyone he hired to help find her, including Edge, but our edgy boy is instead chosen by the series Dragon, who saves him and links him as the new rider. This initially becomes just a revenge story to take down Kramen, but it gets more and more complex as it goes on. The girl Edge decided he loved is actually called Arzel, and you see she's actually thousands of years old, and her and the dragons were created by the ancient people. And you go more and more through the story, finding the tower and making your way through ancient
Drones,
tower network, dragons program, weapons of mass destruction, and it's a multi-layered story with characters who have their own ideals, and Edge is basically stuck in the middle of all of it due to being the only one chosen by the dragon. Some want you to fight for them, others try to manipulate you, and there's a whole question of whether your enemy is even really your enemy, though he does do some pretty naughty things. Not going on the nice list this year, Crayman! I'm not going to spoil everything in case there's a chance you actually played this game at some point in your life. That would be very cool, but there's incredibly good moments like an entire town being blasted off the map, and it's a pretty prominent one. You spend a lot of time there, and poof, it's just gone. You can't go back there anymore. And the origins behind the entire Panzer Dragoon series are explored through lore records in an underground lab. It's really good stuff. Hard to follow sometimes, but a standalone story that enhances everything else about the series. What really makes Saga elite, though, is the combat. On the surface, it's not that different to Final Fantasy's active time battle. You have 3 gauges that fill up when you're doing nothing. Some of the more powerful attacks need 2 bars to use, but for the most part your regular attacks just need 1, so you can stack them and use them all at once if you want to. But it's the Panzer Dragoon-y part that truly makes it. You can move around your enemy at any point, which stops the gauge from filling up, but can let you find their weak points or hide away from their more powerful attacks. They can move you around too, which doesn't stop your gauge, but usually puts you in the red area, which is a bad place to be because they're going to attack you with something pretty strong. It's all about saving that gauge and positioning. A lot of the time their weak point is in the red area, so you're risking them doing a strong attack so that you can do a strong attack. Just like the core series, you've got the dragon's lock-on blast, which hits multiple objects at once, or multiple parts of an enemy if it's just one enemy, or you've got your gun which just focuses on a single area. That's more valuable when there's just one enemy, or you're focusing on just getting the weak point. You can also spend BP on your usual RPG attacks, although the game doesn't really demand you use them until the very end. You can quite easily get by with just your gun and dragon shooting if you're moving around all the time. Now, a sequel could have gone a bit further with challenging you to use your BP attacks more, but honestly the core is already so fun. It's rarely difficult as such, but it gives you a constant level of engagement, to always be watching out for the perfect attack opportunities. You can't just mash A to get through fights like some other turn-based games. It's gone down as one of the greatest combat systems I've ever used, and it's really just born out of, what if Panzer Dragoon had turn-based combat? And you know what? That's spectacular. They were designing Panzer Dragoon and they said, what if there were a menu here at times? And it's fantastic. Another mechanic you don't really need to engage with, but is cooler when you do, is the dragon type. It takes up a move in combat when you do this, but it basically allows you to shift all your stats around. Put everything into attack if you want to, balance everything out, become super speedy when switching position. I pretty much found what worked for me and prioritized attack and stuck with it for most of the playthrough, but there's a few points in the endgame bosses where I definitely shifted those stats around. And hey, it changes color. That's pretty cool. Panzer Dragoon has some of the best visuals I've ever seen, which may sound crazy if you're just looking at the model and texture quality, but take it as a whole, and you've got an art style that achieves more on a low polygon budget than most modern games do with ray tracing. I mean, look at the way that the color shifts on this lift as it goes down and down, getting darker the lower it gets, the flicker from the flames at the camp, the light refraction underwater. There's so many incredibly convincing effects, and due to the low resolution, you sometimes get like a sprite-like quality to distant objects which just looks gorgeous. None of it's pre-rendered, so everything is of equal fidelity, and the use of color is just extraordinary. I also love how the Saturn does transparencies. Almost every game does this, where the shadows are just kinda dithered and parts of the UI are too, and honestly, it's iconic. What really ties it together though is the soundtrack. Panzer Dragoon has a vibe and resonance unlike anything else, and it's almost entirely owed to the weird feeling of the music. It feels old and futuristic at the same time, out of place, odd, but also at times magical and hopeful. Just take a look at this world a sec.
プロテクトキー2のキーコードを入力してください。
You spend most of your time on the back of your Dragoon, which doesn't really invite itself to regular RPG world design, at least what we knew in the 90s. You're not walking around a big connected world, but instead choosing locations on a map, which has its benefits. It means you're never backtracking, you're just going from place to place really quickly. A big chunk of these are just linearly coded valleys, but there's also a bunch of sandboxes and others with mild puzzles to them. Saga isn't an open world game. That's part of why it's so short. It's constantly pulling you through all these areas at a really brisk pace. Things get more tangible in the areas that take Edge around on foot, and there's some pretty huge areas to explore. You sometimes need to go back to the area gate and shift the day and night cycle too, which is gorgeous visually. It can be a bit annoying sometimes to run all the way to an area, only to be told it won't work until night, and so you run back to the gate and then run all the way back, but it's still incredibly ambitious they are pulling this off before any other game was really doing this. It may look a little bit clunky to interact with Edge, but honestly, it's pretty good. The regular Panzer Dragoon aiming cursor appears when on foot too, and you've got to aim to interact with anything you want, but it all ties intrinsically together with the regular Dragon gameplay, so Edge doesn't feel tonally different to the Dragon. I think it makes sense. But also keep into account, what Sega made here was unlike anything else being done. Not just for RPGs, but adventure games. Not to compare it to Final Fantasy VII much more, but that game was using low poly sprites on 2D backgrounds with text. In Saga, every environment, every model, every town is full 3D, at about as high as a level as the Sega Saturn could do. All of that with full Japanese voice acting. You'd need around 10 discs to pull off all this at Final Fantasy VII's scope, but regardless, this game was trailblazing. They were figuring all this out for the first time. Saga released almost a full year before Ocarina of Time. It really wasn't established how a 3D camera works in adventure games, or how RPGs even work at all at this fidelity. By all means, Panzer Dragoon Saga is for the Sega Saturn, what Final Fantasy VII is for the PlayStation, what Ocarina of Time is for the N64. All of that, of course, is except for audience. By the time it released in Japan, the Dreamcast was only 10 months away, and it wasn't going to drive people to finally flock towards the Saturn. It didn't matter how good it was. And with Sega Saturn games rarely being re-released, and Panzer Dragoon only resurging through remakes of debatable quality, even if they did get to the point of a Saga remake, it probably wouldn't come close to the artistic mastery they achieved in 1998. At the very least, Saga's legacy led to the Xbox's excellent Panzer Dragoon Orta, a direct continuation of Saga's story with Arzel's daughter as the star. Truly one of the original Xbox's most excellent games and one of the best rail shooters of all time. Saga's not quite the perfect game. Some enemy encounters have some annoying introductions no matter how many times you've seen them. One dungeon is incredibly samey looking all the way through, and the translation says this gun does extra damage to weak points, and it doesn't do that. But those faults sink away into the shadow of everything it does excellently. There still aren't video game worlds with as much depth and character as this one, and it's all done through a super tight runtime that knows when to move on and what's actually important. Within 10 minutes, you're fighting things like this. You're on the back of an ancient dragon, you don't need that gradual power crawl, but the world getting more interesting and exciting is instead the drive. The most special thing that Saga does is feel complete. It's one of the shortest RPGs I have ever played, but I didn't need more. It compacts everything in and does all it wants to do. This really is a very special game to me. I mean, yeah, it's valuable, yeah, it's rare, but that stuff doesn't really matter. It's what it does as a form of art that really excels it. It really pushed the industry forward and was doing things that no other game was doing, at least not on this scale. And it's just magnificent as a product. But also the sentimental reasons of my wife just seeking this out without me ever hinting or saying I wanted it, because I'd never say to her that I want an expensive, rare game. But the fact that she was thinking, like, what would I actually cherish? And what do I not already have on the shelf? There's a few games on that shelf. So it meant a lot that it was just a really thoughtful gift. And it remains one of my favorite gifts, probably my most favorite gift I've ever received. And it's something that's essential to the Sega Saturn, which feels bad to say because something essential should be something that's, broadly around and broadly available, and this absolutely is not. But I think you don't truly get to live through what the Sega Saturn is without playing Panzer Dragoon Saga. So whatever way you have to play it, I highly recommend you do. because it's going to make that little black console one of your absolute favorites just from the pure presence of this game. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, everybody, and I will catch you next time. Bye-bye.